The sound of porcelain breaking is something you never forget. Not the sharp crack, but what comes after. That settling of fragments on tile, the way silence rushes in to fill the space where something whole used to be. That's how my life shattered the night I got fired. A single coffee mug slipping from my exhausted fingers at 3 in the morning, and suddenly I was crying on my kitchen floor, picking up pieces, wondering how I'd gone from being a respected nurse to being nothing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't really start with me. It starts with a little girl who dialed the wrong number on the worst night of her life. And somehow, impossibly, that wrong number was exactly right. My name is Isabel Morgan, and I used to believe that doing the right thing mattered. I used to believe that honesty would protect you, that the truth was a shield, that institutions cared about integrity. I was so naive. So stupidly, dangerously naive. And the night everything fell apart, I learned that the world doesn't reward whistleblowers, it devours them. Let me take you back 3 weeks before that phone rang. 3 weeks before a stranger with shadows in his eyes walked into my daughter's life and mine and changed everything. St. Mercy Hospital had been my home for 7 years. I worked the pediatric wing, night shifts mostly, because that's when sick children need you most, when the fear is loudest, when parents are exhausted, when a gentle voice and warm hands can mean the difference between panic and peace. I loved my job with a fierceness that surprised even me. My daughter, Lily, would joke that I loved those children more than I loved sleep. She wasn't entirely wrong. Lily, God, where do I even start with Lily? 8 years old, with hair the color of wheat fields and eyes so clear, they looked like pieces of sky trapped in a small, serious face. She'd lost her father before she could remember him, a drunk driver. A phone call at 2 a.m., the kind of tragedy that becomes a single terrible sentence in your life story. I raised her alone and I did it with everything I had. We lived above a tavern called the Crooked Crown in the old quarter of the city, where rent was cheap and the walls were thin, and you could hear the ghosts of 100 years of laughter and sorrow. But I'm wandering. Focus, Isabel. 3 weeks before everything changed, I discovered something at the hospital, something that made my blood run cold. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way except what I found. I was checking inventory in the blood storage room, a routine task, the kind of thing you do on autopilot while your mind drifts. But that night, my mind didn't drift. It caught on something, a discrepancy. Bags of O-negative that should have come from the regional blood bank, properly screened, properly documented, but the serial numbers were wrong. The dates didn't match. And when I cross-referenced the requisition forms, I found something that made my stomach drop. These blood bags had come from somewhere else, somewhere unauthorized, somewhere that didn't screen for diseases, didn't follow protocols, didn't care who lived or died as long as someone made money. I should have been more careful. I should have been smarter. But I was thinking about children, about immunocompromised kids receiving transfusions, about tiny bodies too weak to fight off infections, about parents who trusted us with their most precious treasures. I was thinking with my heart instead of my head. I reported it. I went straight to my supervisor, then to hospital administration, then to the medical director. I presented my findings, my documentation, my evidence. I expected shock. I expected immediate action. I expected them to care. Instead, I got silence, the kind of silence that has teeth. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting. No warning, no explanation. Just a security guard escorting me to the administrative wing, to a conference room that smelled like old coffee and fear. 3 people waited for me there, the hospital director, the head of human resources, and a lawyer whose smile never reached his eyes. They told me I was being terminated, effective immediately. They cited performance issues, attendance problems, complaints from families, all lies, all fabricated. When I tried to defend myself when I mentioned the contaminated blood, the lawyer leaned forward and told me that if I pursued this matter, If I spoke to anyone about my unfounded allegations, I would be sued for defamation, slander, and breach of confidentiality. They had documents, signatures, evidence of my supposed incompetence that had somehow materialized overnight. I left that building with a cardboard box of my belongings and the crushing realization that I'd been destroyed for trying to save lives. The next 2 weeks were a blur of rejection. Every hospital I applied to somehow already knew about my termination. Every clinic, every medical facility, every urgent care center. Doors closed before I could even knock. My savings evaporated. Bills piled up. And Lily, my sweet, observant Lily, started asking questions I couldn't answer. Why was I home so much? Why did I look so tired? Why did I cry in the bathroom with the water running? I tried to shield her from it all. I smiled when she looked at me. I made her favorite meals even when we could barely afford groceries. I told her everything would be fine, that I was just between jobs, that sometimes grown-ups needed a little break. She believed me because she was 8 and because she trusted me completely. That trust felt like glass in my chest. The night the coffee mug broke was the night I'd been officially evicted from my nursing career. A letter from the state medical board informing me that my license was under review due to allegations of misconduct. I knew then that it wasn't just one hospital. It was the entire system. Someone powerful wanted me silent, and they had the resources to make it happen. I sat on that kitchen floor, porcelain fragments cutting into my palms, and I wondered if I should have just kept quiet. If protecting my daughter's stability was worth more than protecting strangers' children, if integrity was just a luxury for people who could afford it. I didn't know then that in 3 days, a little girl would call the wrong number. I didn't know that the man who answered would be someone who understood darkness better than anyone I'd ever meet. I didn't know that my world, already shattered, was about to be remade into something I couldn't have imagined. But that's how the best and worst things happen, isn't it? In the spaces between giving up and holding on. In the moment when you're so broken that you stop trying to control the outcome and just let the universe surprise you. The phone rang at 4:47 in the morning. I know, because I was staring at my alarm clock, wide awake, calculating how many weeks I could keep us housed and fed before we had to leave the city. 2 months, maybe 3 if I sold everything that wasn't essential. My mind was trapped in that terrible arithmetic of poverty, adding and subtracting, trying to make nothing equal something. The phone rang, and I ignored it. Who calls at 4:47 in the morning with good news? It rang again. Really? And the 4th ring, I grabbed it, ready to snap at whatever telemarketer or wrong number was disturbing the only quiet hours I had. But before I could speak, I heard breathing, small, frightened breathing. Then a voice, so young it made my heart stop. "Please," she whispered. "My mommy won't wake up." I sat up so fast the room spun. "Sweetheart, where are you? What's your name?" But the line was already dead. I stared at my phone, heart hammering. Then I did something that probably makes no sense to anyone who hasn't worked pediatric nursing. I called the number back. It went straight to voicemail, some generic automated message. No name, no clues. I should have called 911. That would have been the rational thing. But something in that child's voice had reached into my chest and grabbed hold of something broken. Something that remembered what it felt like to care so much it hurt. And I thought, irrationally, desperately, what if she needs someone who understands? What if she needs someone who knows how to talk to scared children? I was pulling on clothes before I'd fully decided what I was doing. I woke Lily gently, told her we had to go help someone, bundled her into her warmest coat. She was used to this kind of thing from my nursing days, the sudden departures, the emergencies. She rubbed her eyes and trusted me completely, the way children do before the world teaches them not to. But here's the thing, I had no idea where to go. I had a phone number, and nothing else. I stood in my tiny living room, Lily's hand in mine, and felt like the world's biggest fool. And then my phone rang again. Same number, I answered before the first ring finished. "Sweetheart, are you there? Can you tell me where you are?" This time, a different voice answered. Deep, measured, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Something old world, refined. "Who is this?" the voice asked. Not unkind, just careful, controlled. "My name is Isabel Morgan. A little girl just called me from this number. She said her mother wouldn't wake up. I'm a nurse. I was a nurse, and I'm trying to help. Please, is there a child there? Is she safe?" Silence. The kind of pause that feels like calculation. Then, "The child is here. She is unharmed, but her mother collapsed." I was attempting to determine the appropriate course of action when the child apparently used my phone without permission. "Is the mother breathing?" I asked, my training taking over. "Is she responsive to stimuli? Any visible injuries, signs of trauma?" Another pause. You ask questions like someone who knows what they're doing, a hint of respect in that deep voice, or maybe curiosity. "The mother is unconscious but breathing. No obvious injuries. Pulse is weak but steady." I was about to call for emergency services. "Do it," I said immediately. "But tell me where you are. That little girl is terrified and she needs someone who can help her understand what's happening while the paramedics get there. I have experience with pediatric trauma. Please, I don't know why I was begging a stranger. I don't know why I felt this desperate need to be there for a child I'd never met. Maybe because I'd lost everything else. Maybe because the universe had put this one small crisis in my path, and I needed to believe I could still fix something." "The Crooked Crown Tavern," he said finally. "3rd floor, apartment 3B. "But I should warn you, that's my building," I interrupted, something cold sliding down my spine. "I live on the 2nd floor. The silence that followed felt heavy, loaded with implications I didn't understand yet. "Then come quickly," he said and hung up. I took the stairs 2 at a time, Lily struggling to keep up behind me. The 3rd floor of our building was always dim. Half the hallway lights were broken, and our landlord was the kind of man who'd fix a leak only after the ceiling collapsed. But that morning in the pre-dawn darkness, it felt like descending into something ancient and waiting. Apartment 3B had been empty for as long as we'd lived there. Or so I'd thought. But when I reached the door, it was slightly ajar, and I could see candlelight flickering inside. Not electric light. Candles. I pushed the door open slowly, Lily clutching my hand so tightly her fingers left marks. The apartment was beautiful in a way that made no sense. While mine was cramped and cluttered with the debris of a struggling single mother's life, this space looked like it belonged in another century. Heavy curtains, antique furniture, walls lined with books that seemed older than the building itself. And in the center of the room, on a velvet sofa that must have cost more than 3 months of my rent, lay a woman in a hospital uniform. Beside her sat a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with dark curls and enormous eyes. She was holding a silver crucifix on a chain, clutching it like it might protect her from the entire world. When she saw me, she stood up so fast she almost stumbled. "You came," she said, and started crying. Not hysterical sobs, just quiet tears sliding down her cheeks, the kind of crying that comes from being brave for too long. I crossed the room and knelt in front of her, checking her over with my eyes the way I'd been trained, any injuries, signs of shock, trauma indicators. But she seemed physically unharmed, just terrified, just heartbreakingly young. "I'm Isabel," I told her gently. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sierra," she whispered. "Sierra Blackwood. That's my mommy." She was coming home from work, and she said she felt dizzy, and then she just fell. I've tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't open her eyes, and I got scared. And I found a phone, and I just pressed buttons until someone answered. I looked at the woman on the sofa, mid-30s I'd guess, with Sierra's same dark hair. Her face was pale, but her breathing was steady. I checked her pulse, exactly as the man on the phone had described. Weak, but regular. No signs of trauma or injury. Sarah, do you know what happened before your mommy felt dizzy? Did she eat something unusual? Has she been sick? Sarah shook her head. She's been really tired. She works night shifts at the hospital. St. Mercy. She comes home and sleeps a lot. But this morning, she said her head hurt really bad, and then she couldn't finish the sentence. St. Mercy. The name hit me like a physical blow. This woman worked at St. Mercy, the same hospital that had destroyed my life. Sarah, I said carefully. Who called the ambulance? Who's the man who answered the phone when I called back? She looked confused. What man? I was alone. Mommy fell, and I was all alone, and I was so scared. I looked around the apartment. We were the only people here. The woman on the sofa, Sarah, Lily, standing uncertainly by the door, and me. No one else. But I had spoken to someone. A man with a voice like midnight and old books. A man who had told me exactly where to come. The candles flickered, though there was no draft. And I felt, for the first time, like I was standing in a story that didn't follow the rules I understood. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. I stayed with Sarah the entire time, explaining what was happening, what the paramedics would do, why they needed to take her mother to the hospital. She held on to me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and uncertain. Lily sat beside us, her small hand on Sarah's shoulder, offering the kind of wordless comfort that children give each other. I told the paramedics everything I knew, the sudden dizziness, the collapse, the lack of obvious trauma. They were efficient, professional, exactly what you'd want in an emergency. But when they asked if I was family, I hesitated. I'm a neighbor, I said. I'm also a nurse. I was a nurse at St. Mercy, actually, until recently. One of the paramedics looked up at that. You're Isabel Morgan? He was young, probably fresh out of training, with kind eyes. I heard about what happened to you. That was messed up. Everyone in the EA was talking about it, about how you tried to report contaminated blood supplies and they fired you for it. I felt something crack open in my chest. Validation. Someone believed me. They really did that to you? The other paramedic asked, older, more weathered. Jesus. And now this woman. He gestured to Sarah's mother. She works at St. Mercy too? According to her daughter, yes. The two paramedics exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Concern? Suspicion? Then the older one said, we'll take good care of her. But you should know, there have been other cases. Other staff members from St. Mercy coming in with unexplained symptoms. Dizziness, fainting, severe headaches. Administration keeps saying it's stress, overwork. But the nurses are starting to wonder. They loaded Sarah's mother onto the stretcher. I asked if I could accompany them to the hospital with Sarah, and they agreed without hesitation. Lily came too, because I couldn't leave her alone in that strange apartment with its inexplicable candles and the lingering sense that someone else had been there, someone I couldn't see. As we left, I glanced back at apartment 3B one last time. The door was closed, the candles were extinguished, and I could have sworn I saw a shadow standing in the window, tall and still, watching us leave. But that was impossible. We'd been alone in that apartment. Sarah had said so. My own eyes had confirmed it, hadn't they? Sarah's mother woke up 6 hours later in a hospital bed in St. Mercy's emergency ward. I'd stayed the entire time, partly because Sarah wouldn't let go of my hand, partly because I wanted answers. Lily had fallen asleep in a chair, her head on my shoulder, exhausted by the strange adventure our morning had become. The woman's name was Miranda Blackwood, and when she opened her eyes and saw me sitting beside her daughter, her first response was fear. Not of me, of something else. She looked around the hospital room with the expression of someone who'd woken up in enemy territory. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Then she saw Sierra, and her entire body relaxed. "Baby, are you okay?" Sierra climbed onto the bed and wrapped her arms around her mother, crying again. I gave them a moment, then introduced myself. Miranda's eyes widened when I said my name. "Isabel Morgan? The nurse who reported the contaminated blood?" I nodded, surprised. "You know about that?" "Everyone knows about that," she said quietly, glancing at the door as if worried someone might hear. "You're a hero, and they crucified you for it." "I'm not a hero," I said, exhausted. "I'm unemployed and about to be evicted. Heroes don't usually end up homeless." Miranda looked at me for a long moment, then made a decision. "I need to tell you something. But not here. Can you come to my apartment when they discharge me? Please, it's important." There was something in her eyes that reminded me of myself 3 weeks ago, that combination of fear and determination. That look of someone who's seen something terrible and can't unsee it. "Of course," I said. They discharged her that afternoon with a diagnosis of severe exhaustion and dehydration. The attending doctor lectured her about self-care and proper rest, then handed her a prescription for vitamins and sent her on her way. But I saw how Miranda looked at that doctor, not with gratitude but with barely concealed distrust. We took a taxi back to the Crooked Crown. Miranda insisted on paying, even though I could tell money was as tight for her as it was for me. Sarah held both our hands in the back seat and Lily chattered to her about school and her favorite books, trying to make her smile. It almost worked. When we climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, Miranda stopped outside her apartment door. "Thank you," she said, "for being there this morning. Sarah told me you came immediately when she called." That was everything. "She called by mistake," I admitted. "Wrong number. Single quotes." Miranda smiled, sad and strange. "Maybe, or maybe some mistakes are exactly right." We entered the apartment, and in daylight, it looked completely different. The candles were gone. The heavy curtains were pulled back, revealing ordinary windows. The antique furniture was still there, but it seemed less magical. More like the kind of thing you'd find at an estate sale. Normal. Explainable. Except I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd felt. "Can I get you something?" Miranda asked, moving toward the kitchen. "Coffee? Tea?" "Answers," I said. "You said you needed to tell me something." She stopped, her back to me. Sarah and Lily had gone to Sarah's room, their voices floating down the hallway. Miranda turned around and I saw tears in her eyes. "I was going to do what you did," she said. "I found the same thing. Contaminated blood supplies. Unauthorized sources. But I saw what happened to you, Isabel. I saw them destroy your entire life in a matter of days. And I got scared. I kept quiet. I kept my job. And now I think they're trying to silence me anyway." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? I've been sick for 3 weeks. Dizzy spells, headaches, nausea. I thought it was stress. But this morning I realized it started right after I accessed the file room, right after I started documenting what I found. And I'm not the only one. 3 other nurses who worked in the blood storage area have had similar symptoms. One of them is in intensive care. They're calling it a virus, but I don't think it's a virus, Isabel. I think someone is making us sick." I sat down heavily. "That's insane. That would be attempted murder." "I know how it sounds," Miranda said. "But think about it. Someone is making money off those contaminated blood supplies. A lot of money. Enough money to buy off hospital administration, to fabricate evidence against whistleblowers, to destroy careers. Why wouldn't they go further? Why wouldn't they eliminate threats more permanently?" I wanted to tell her she was paranoid. I wanted to say that hospitals didn't work that way, that there were safeguards, oversight, consequences. But I learned the hard way that institutions protect themselves first, and truth never. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "I have documents, evidence, names and dates, and shipment records. I've been copying everything I can find, hiding it. I was going to turn it over to the police, or the medical board, or a journalist, someone. But then I got sick, and I realized that if something happens to me, that evidence disappears. Sarah is left alone, and nothing changes. She crossed the room and knelt in front of me, taking my hands. Hers were cold, trembling. I need your help, Isabel. I need someone who understands what we're up against, someone brave enough to fight back. Please. I looked at this woman I'd just met, this mother who was terrified for her child and her own life, and I thought about all the ways I could say no. I could tell her I had my own daughter to protect. I could explain that I was already destroyed, already powerless. I could choose survival over justice. But then I remembered that little voice on the phone at 4:47 in the morning. Please, my mommy won't wake up. I remembered every sick child I'd ever cared for, every parent I'd promised to protect their baby. I remembered why I became a nurse in the first place, because I believed I could make a difference, because I thought one person's determination could change outcomes. Maybe I'd been naive. Maybe I still was. Okay, I said. Show me what you have. Miranda's evidence was damning. Meticulously organized, thoroughly documented, impossible to dismiss as coincidence or error. She showed me shipping manifests that didn't match blood bank records, financial transfers to shell companies, internal memos discussing acceptable contamination rates like they were talking about produce quality. The scope of it was staggering, not just one hospital, but a network of facilities. Not just contaminated blood, but organs, tissue samples, anything that could be harvested and sold. We were sitting at her kitchen table, documents spread between us, when I felt it. That same presence I'd sensed that morning. That feeling of being watched by something that existed just outside ordinary perception. I looked up. The apartment was empty except for Miranda and me. Lily and Sierra were still playing in the bedroom. The windows showed only afternoon light and the street below. But I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that someone else was there. Miranda, I said carefully, this morning when I called the number back after Sarah's first call, someone answered. A man. He told me where to come, what condition you were in. He was here, in this apartment. But Sarah said she was alone. Miranda's face went very still. What did he sound like? Deep voice, refined, old-fashioned way of speaking. He knew exactly what was wrong with you, and he was calm about it, like he'd seen 1,000 emergencies and nothing shocked him anymore. Did he tell you his name? No. But Miranda, who was he? How did he get into your apartment? How did he know what was happening? She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear her. I don't know his name. I've never seen his face clearly. But he's been helping me. For weeks now. Ever since I started documenting the evidence, information appears on my desk at work. Files I shouldn't have access to. Passwords that shouldn't work for me. Camera footage from security rooms I've never entered. And sometimes, late at night, I feel like someone is watching over us. Not threatening. Protective. That's impossible. I know. But it's true. She turned to face me. This morning, when I collapsed, the last thing I remember is thinking that Sarah was alone and terrified and I couldn't help her. And then, nothing. But Sarah told me something strange. She said that after I fell, the lights in the apartment went out. All of them, even though it was morning. She was alone in the dark with her unconscious mother, and she was so scared she couldn't even scream. And then a phone appeared on the table beside her. Not my phone, a different one. Old-fashioned, like something from decades ago. And it was ringing. When she answered, a man's voice told her to press certain numbers, to call for help. He talked her through the entire thing, step by step, until she reached you. My skin was covered in goosebumps. Where's the phone now? Gone. When the paramedics arrived, it had vanished. We stared at each other. Two rational women trying to make sense of something that violated every law of reason. Then I said, Miranda, I think we need to consider the possibility that someone very powerful is involved in this. Someone with resources we can't imagine. Someone who can make phones appear and disappear, who can access secure files, who can be in places without being seen. You mean someone connected to the conspiracy? Or someone fighting against it? Before Miranda could respond, the lights in the apartment flickered. Once, twice, then steady. But in that brief moment of darkness, I saw something. A shadow, taller than any human should be, standing in the corner of the room. When the lights came back, the corner was empty, but on the kitchen table, next to all our documents, was a single piece of paper that hadn't been there before. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a printout of a bank statement. Not from any account I recognized, but the name at the top made me gasp. Dr. Evan Thorne, the medical director of St. Mercy Hospital, the man who had personally overseen my termination. And the amounts listed on that statement were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred from something called Nightfall Medical Solutions over the past 6 months. At the bottom of the page, written in elegant handwriting that looked like it came from a different century, were 3 words: follow the money. Miranda and I looked at each other. Then, as if we'd reached the same decision simultaneously, we started searching the documents with new purpose. Not just looking for evidence of contamination, but following the financial trail, tracking the money from Nightfall Medical Solutions to St. Mercy, then to other hospitals, then to a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. We worked through the afternoon and into evening. Lily and Sarah eventually got hungry, and I made them sandwiches while Miranda continued cross-referencing documents. The evidence was building piece by piece into something that looked like organized crime on a massive scale. As darkness fell, I felt that presence again. Stronger this time, closer, and I realized that whoever or whatever was helping us was running out of patience with subtlety. Miranda, I said quietly, I think our invisible friend wants us to do something with this information. Soon. She nodded, her face pale in the lamplight. But who do we give it to? If the hospital is compromised, if the medical board is involved, if they can destroy careers and make people sick to cover their tracks, who can we trust? As if in answer, another piece of paper appeared on the table. This one had a name and address. James Chun, investigative journalist, The Metropolitan Chronicle. Below that, in the same elegant handwriting, he cannot be bought. He cannot be frightened. He will listen. I stared at the paper, then at the empty room, then at Miranda. I think, I said slowly, we need to acknowledge that we have a guardian angel. A very strange, very powerful guardian angel who really wants us to expose this conspiracy. I think you're right, Miranda whispered. And I think we'd be fools not to accept the help. That night, we decided to contact James Chun first thing in the morning. We gathered all the evidence, made multiple copies, stored them in different locations. We were thorough. We were careful. We were terrified. But we were also determined, because we'd both chosen to do the right thing, even when it cost us everything. And now, impossibly, someone was helping us do it. I went to bed that night in my own apartment with Lily beside me, and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that shadow in the corner, about the phone that appeared and disappeared, about a voice on the phone that had guided a terrified child through the worst moment of her life. Who was he? What was he? And why did he care so much about exposing corruption in a hospital? I didn't know. But I was grateful, and I was hopeful, for the first time in weeks. Foolish, maybe, but hope is a stubborn thing. It grows in the darkest places. James Chun met us at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the Metropolitan Chronicle offices. Miranda had called him that morning, said she had evidence of systematic corruption in the city's hospital system, and he'd agreed to meet immediately. That should have been my first clue that he was the right person. He didn't dismiss us, didn't assume we were cranks or conspiracy theorists. He just said, bring everything you have. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and the kind of intensity that comes from years of chasing truth through walls of lies. He ordered coffee for all of us, then cleared a table in the corner of the shop and said, "Show me." We spread it all out. The shipping manifests, the financial records, the medical reports, the testimony from other nurses. Everything Miranda had risked her life to collect, everything our mysterious guardian had helped us obtain. James went through it methodically, asking questions, taking notes, occasionally letting out low whistles of disbelief. This is huge," he said finally. "This isn't just a hospital scandal. This is organized crime, medical trafficking. We're talking federal charges, possible RICO violations. Dozens of people could go to prison. Can you publish it?" Miranda asked, her voice tight with hope and fear. I will. But I need to verify some of this first. Get independent confirmation, protect my sources. This is the kind of story that brings legal armies down on a publication. We need to be bulletproof." He looked at us both. "Are you prepared for what comes next? Once this is public, you're going to be targets. They'll try to discredit you, threaten you, maybe worse. They've already tried," I said. "I lost my career. Miranda lost her health. We don't have much left to lose. Except our lives," James said bluntly. "And your daughter's safety. I need you to understand. People have died for less than this." The words hung in the air between us. I thought about Lily, about the trust in her eyes when she looked at me. I thought about Sarah, about that voice on the phone in the early morning. "Please, my mommy won't wake up." "Then we make sure the truth comes out before they can stop us," I said. "We make sure enough people know that silencing us becomes pointless." James studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, give me 3 days. I'll verify what I can, write the article, and get it past our legal team. In the meantime, both of you need to be somewhere safe. Do you have family outside the city? Friends who can take you in?" Miranda shook her head. "It's just me and Sarah, and Isabel." "Then stay together," James said. "Don't go back to work. Don't follow your normal routine. Someone is watching the hospital staff. If they realize you're both connected to this, they might." He stopped abruptly, looking past me toward the coffee shop entrance. I turned to follow his gaze and saw 3 men in expensive suits entering. They moved like security, like people used to violence, and their eyes were scanning the room systematically. "We need to leave," James said quietly. "Now. Back exit." We grabbed the documents and moved toward the rear of the coffee shop, trying to look casual even though my heart was hammering. As we slipped through the kitchen and out into the alley behind the building, I heard one of the men asking the barista if she'd seen 2 women with children. We ran. Not dramatically, not like a chase scene in a movie, but with the kind of urgent speed that parents use when danger is close and children are vulnerable. James led us through a maze of side streets and narrow alleys, finally stopping in a parking garage 3 blocks away. "How did they find us?" Miranda gasped, her face pale. "I don't know," James said grimly. "I was careful. I didn't tell anyone about this meeting except my editor. And I trust her completely. But I was thinking about something else. About how we'd been saved that morning by an impossible phone call. About how evidence appeared on tables when we needed it. About shadows that watched and protected. Maybe someone wanted them to find us," I said slowly. "Maybe someone wanted to prove to us how dangerous this is, how real the threat is." James looked at me like I was crazy, but Miranda understood. "Our guardian angel," she said. "What are you talking about?" James demanded. So we told him about the phone that appeared and disappeared, about the documents that materialized, about the presence we both felt, watching over us, guiding us. To his credit, James didn't laugh. He just absorbed the information, then said, "Do you think this person or entity or whatever can protect you until the story breaks?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think they're trying." "Then we need to move faster than 3 days," James said. "If someone that powerful is involved, either helping you or targeting you, we can't afford to wait." "I'll push the story through tonight. It'll publish tomorrow morning first thing." "That gives them less time to stop it," we agreed. James gave us a burner phone with his number programmed in, told us to call if anything happened, then disappeared back toward his office at a run. Miranda and I stood in that parking garage with our daughters, surrounded by the smell of exhaust and concrete. And I felt the enormity of what we were doing crash over me like a wave. We were about to declare war on an organization powerful enough to corrupt entire hospitals, wealthy enough to buy doctors and administrators, ruthless enough to poison nurses who got too close to the truth. And our only ally was a shadow we couldn't see and a journalist we'd just met. "Isabel," Miranda said quietly, "are we insane?" "Probably," I said, "but we're also right. And that has to count for something." We went back to the Crooked Crown, but not to our apartments. Instead, I took them to the basement storage area, a maze of old furniture and forgotten belongings that tenants had left behind over the years. It wasn't comfortable, but it was hidden. We made a nest of blankets and old cushions, gave the girls books and snacks, and settled in to wait. Hours passed. Lily and Sarah eventually fell asleep curled up together, their small bodies seeking comfort in proximity. Miranda and I sat in the dim light from a single bulb, not speaking, just existing in the space between terror and determination. Around midnight, I felt it again, that presence. But this time, it felt different. Not just watching, but closer, more substantial. The single bulb flickered and went out. Miranda grabbed my arm in the darkness, her grip tight enough to hurt. And then, in the corner of the basement, I saw something that made my breath stop. A figure. Tall, impossibly tall, dressed in clothing that looked like it came from another century. The darkness around him seemed thicker, more alive, as if the shadows themselves were drawn to him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a statue of protection carved from night itself. "Thank you," I whispered into the darkness. "For everything." The figure inclined his head slowly. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, he spoke. "Tomorrow, the truth emerges. But tonight, you are hunted. I will keep watch. Sleep if you can." Then he was gone. Not fading, not walking away. Just gone. As if he'd never been there at all. Except I knew he had been. And I knew he was still there, somewhere in the darkness, standing between us and whatever wanted to silence us. Miranda and I didn't sleep. We couldn't. But we felt, for the first time in weeks, something that resembled safety. The article went live at 6 a.m. James called us on the burner phone to let us know, his voice tight with exhaustion and triumph. "It's done. Front page, digital, and print. Every news outlet in the city is picking it up. It's going viral." By 8 a.m., 3 hospital executives had been arrested. By 10 a.m., federal investigators had raided St. Mercy Hospital and 6 other facilities. By noon, the story was national news. We watched it all unfold from the basement of the Crooked Crown, Miranda's phone showing us headlines that seemed impossible. Everything we'd documented, everything we'd risked exposure for, was suddenly public knowledge. The contaminated blood supplies, the financial corruption, the systematic targeting of whistleblowers, all of it laid bare in black and white. Dr. Evan Thorne's face was on every news channel, being led away in handcuffs. The CEO of Nightfall Medical Solutions was in custody. Names we'd seen on documents were suddenly attached to arrest warrants and federal charges. We did it. Miranda whispered, tears streaming down her face. We actually did it, but I couldn't celebrate yet because I kept thinking about the men in suits at the coffee shop, about the network of corruption we'd exposed, about the fact that desperate people do desperate things when they're cornered. Around 2 p.m., someone knocked on the basement door. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and confident. Miranda and I looked at each other. The girls were still sleeping, exhausted by the strange adventure we dragged them into. I moved toward the door slowly, my hand shaking. Who is it? I called. Police. Detective Sarah Martinez. I'm with the Special Task Force investigating the St. Mercy case. Mercy case James Chun sent me. You're safe now. I opened the door a crack. A woman in her 50s stood there, badge held up, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Her eyes were kind but sharp, taking in our makeshift hiding place with a glance that missed nothing. Ms. Morgan? Ems. Blackwood. We've been looking for you. You're both going to need to give statements, but first, we're getting you somewhere secure. There have been threats. Some of the people you helped expose are still at large, and they're angry. We gathered our daughters and our few belongings and followed Detective Martinez out of the basement. The morning light was blindingly bright after our night in the shadows. Police cars were parked outside the Crooked Crown, and I saw neighbors watching from windows, curious and concerned. As we were being led toward the cars, I saw him, just for a moment, standing across the street in the shadow of a building, tall, still, watching, our guardian, our impossible protector. He met my eyes across the distance, and I saw something in his face. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. Then he stepped back into the darkness and was gone. Detective Martinez saw me looking. Something wrong? No, I said, just thanking someone. She gave me a puzzled look, but didn't press. We were driven to a police station, then to a hotel where we gave our statements to a parade of investigators, federal agents, and lawyers. The process took hours, but it felt different from my experience at the hospital. These people believed us. These people were grateful. By the time we emerged, it was evening. Miranda and I stood on the hotel steps, our daughters beside us, and looked out at a city that had changed in the span of a single day. What happens now? Miranda asked. We rebuild, I said. We find new jobs, new lives. We teach our daughters that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Single quotes. James Chun appeared then, running up the hotel steps with a grin on his exhausted face. Ladies, you're heroes. The press wants interviews. The Nursing Association wants to give you awards. The mayor wants to apologize personally. We're not heroes, I said. The same words I'd spoken to Miranda weeks ago. We just did what anyone should do. But most people don't, James countered. That's what makes you extraordinary. That night, back in my own apartment with Lily asleep in her bed, I sat by the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were safer because of what we'd done. Children would receive clean blood transfusions. Families would trust their hospitals again. Justice, imperfect and incomplete, had been served. And somewhere in the shadows, a stranger who had never shown me his face had made it all possible. I thought about that first phone call, about Sarah's small voice saying please, about all the tiny choices that had led to this moment, Miranda's courage in documenting evidence, James's willingness to listen, that mysterious figure's decision to help 2 desperate women fight an impossible battle. Maybe we were heroes after all. Or maybe we were just people who refused to look away when it mattered most. Either way, we'd won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but we'd won. 3 months later, I got my nursing license back. The state medical board issued a formal apology and expunged all the fabricated complaints from my record. I had job offers from 5 different hospitals, all falling over themselves to hire the nurse who'd helped expose the biggest medical corruption scandal in the city's history. I chose St. Mercy, They'd cleaned house completely. New administration, new protocols, new everything. And I wanted to be part of rebuilding the place that had tried to destroy me, turning poison into medicine, darkness into light. Miranda got her job back too, with back pay and a formal apology. We were heroes now, in the eyes of the public. But privately, we knew the truth. We'd been terrified, desperate women who'd gotten impossibly lucky. Or maybe not lucky. Maybe chosen. Because every now and then, even now, I feel that presence. Walking home late at night after a shift, I'll sense someone in the shadows, making sure I get home safely. Looking over documents at my kitchen table, I'll find a note in elegant handwriting, pointing out something I'd missed, small interventions, subtle protections. He's still watching over us. I've stopped trying to understand why. Maybe he lost someone to corruption like this. Maybe he's atoning for something. Maybe he's just someone who believes that the powerless deserve a champion. Or maybe, just maybe, he's something else entirely. Something that exists in the spaces between light and dark, between possible and impossible. Something that chooses, occasionally, to tip the scales toward justice. Last week, Lily came home from school with a story about a man who'd helped her when she got lost on a field trip. He was really tall, she said, and he talked funny, like someone from an old movie, but he was nice. He helped me find my teacher. My blood ran cold. What did he look like, sweetheart? I don't know, she said, puzzled. I couldn't really see his face. It was like he was standing in shadow even though we were in the sunshine. Weird, right? I called Miranda that night. Sarah had told her a similar story. A tall stranger who'd walked her home when she'd stayed late at school, making sure she was safe. He's protecting our daughters now, watching over them the way he watched over us. I should probably be frightened. A mysterious figure following our children should terrify me. But instead, I feel grateful, because I know with absolute certainty that nothing will harm them while he's watching. That whatever he is, wherever he came from, he's chosen us. And that choice has changed everything. Tonight, as I write this, I'm sitting in my apartment with a cup of tea, Lily asleep in her room, the city quiet outside my window. And I feel it again, that presence, not in the room, but close, always close. I walk to the window and look out at the shadows between streetlights. And there, barely visible, I see him, standing guard, standing watch, a sentinel in the darkness. I raise my hand in a small wave. Thank you, I mouth, knowing somehow that he'll understand. The shadow inclines his head, that same slow acknowledgement I saw months ago. Then he fades back into the darkness, and I'm alone again, but not really alone, never really alone anymore. I go to bed thinking about miracles, about wrong numbers that are exactly right, about shadows that protect instead of threaten, about the way one small act of courage can ripple outward and change everything. Sarah called me the wrong number on the worst night of her life, but it wasn't wrong at all. It was the beginning of something impossible and wonderful. It was the moment when justice found its champion, when the powerless found their strength, when two desperate mothers discovered they were never fighting alone. And somewhere in the shadows of this city, a guardian continues his eternal watch. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because some battles are worth fighting forever. Some mistakes are exactly right. And some heroes wear darkness like armor, protecting the light they can no longer touch. I close my eyes and dream of a world where doing the right thing doesn't require a miracle. But until that world arrives, I'll be grateful for the one we got. For the stranger who answered when a little girl needed help. For the shadow that stood between us and destruction. For the impossible becoming possible when it mattered most. Tomorrow, I go back to work. I'll take care of sick children. I'll fight for their safety. I'll stand between them and anything that threatens them. Because that's what nurses do. That's what mothers do. That's what anyone with a conscience should do. And if I ever need help again, if I ever face another impossible battle, I know that somewhere in the darkness, he'll be there, watching, waiting, ready to turn the tide when the world needs it most. That's enough. That's everything. And it all started with a wrong number, on the worst night of a little girl's life, when the universe decided that sometimes miracles wear shadows. Sometimes salvation comes from the darkest places. And sometimes the voice that answers when you cry for help belongs to someone who understands darkness better than anyone, because he's chosen to become light's most unlikely guardian. Thank you, stranger. Thank you for everything, for choosing us, for protecting us, for showing us that even in a world full of corruption and cruelty, there are still forces fighting for good, even if they hide in the shadows, especially because they hide in the shadows. Because that's where true heroes belong, in the spaces between light and dark, fighting battles no one else can see, saving lives no one else can reach. You gave me back my hope. You gave Miranda back her future. You gave our daughters a world where the truth matters and justice is possible, and all it took was one wrong number, one impossible guardian, one choice to answer when a child called for help. That's the story. That's the truth. That's the miracle of the worst and best night of our lives. And I'll carry it with me forever.